Imagine a country where faith is not just a belief, but the very heartbeat of daily life. Churches filled to the brim every Sunday, processions spill through city streets, and prayers mark everything from meals to milestones. In this nation, religion is more than personal conviction, it is the glue of society, woven into family ties, traditions, and even politics. To the outside world, it looks like an unshakable fortress of morality and devotion. And yet, hidden within this fortress lies a paradox that startles anyone who dares to look closer. For behind the hymns and rituals, this is also the country with one of the highest divorce and separation rates in the world. Couples, once united under the blessing of faith, are quietly drifting apart at unprecedented levels. At first glance, it seems impossible. How could the most religious country also be the one where so many marriages are breaking down? Isn't faith supposed to protect love, to strengthen bonds, to keep families together? This paradox is what makes the Philippines so fascinating and so heartbreaking. A nation that proudly calls itself the only predominantly Catholic country in Asia, where the Church's influence remains unparalleled, is also grappling with marriages collapsing at a rate that shocks both its own citizens and outside observers. To understand this contradiction, we have to look beyond the surface, into the everyday lives of people who navigate between tradition and modernity, devotion and discontent. Marriage in the Philippines is often treated as sacred, a lifelong covenant not just between two people but also with God. Yet, behind the solemn vows, there are pressures that few speak about openly. Families push young people to marry early, communities judge those who wait too long, and the expectation to conform overshadows the search for true compatibility. These forces create unions that look perfect on the outside but conceal struggles within. The paradox grows sharper when we listen to the unspoken stories. Husbands and wives who smile at Sunday Mass but sleep in separate rooms. Couples who share meals but not conversations. Parents who stay together out of fear of gossip, even when love has long since vanished. In a society where appearances matter deeply, silence often takes the place of honesty, and resentment quietly builds. Eventually, some cannot take it any longer, and the silence shatters into separation. This raises questions that demand exploration. Is faith strong enough to hold marriages together in a changing world? Or is it precisely the weight of cultural and religious expectations that makes these marriages so fragile? Could it be that in trying so hard to uphold the image of morality, many couples bury the truth of their dissatisfaction until it becomes unbearable? These are not just abstract questions, they shape the lives of millions. And as we move deeper into the story, we will see how faith, culture, and hidden realities intertwine to create one of the greatest social contradictions of our time. From the proud traditions of Catholic devotion to the quiet despair behind closed doors, the Philippines reveals what happens when unshakable beliefs meet the messy, human reality of love and marriage. To understand why the paradox of divorce is so striking here, we first need to appreciate just how deeply faith runs through the Philippines. For many families, religion is not a private practice, but a way of life that shapes every decision, from how children are raised to how communities gather. Catholicism arrived with the Spanish more than 4 centuries ago, and its presence remains everywhere, etched in the architecture of towns, echoed in the rhythm of daily prayers, and felt in the authority of the Church over moral questions. Every week, millions attend Mass, often more than once. In rural areas, church bells still ring out to call the faithful, and in cities, processions bring traffic to a halt as statues of saints are carried through crowded streets. Beyond the rituals, there is also a strong cultural belief that marriage is sacred and divorce is unacceptable. Even today, the Philippines remains one of the few countries in the world where divorce is heavily restricted, and where annulments, often costly and complicated, become the only legal option to end a marriage. This creates a sense of permanence around marriage that, in theory, should make families stronger. Parents encourage their children to view weddings not as personal milestones, but as solemn commitments to God, family, and society. Religious education in schools reinforces the importance of chastity, obedience, and loyalty, tying moral worth to the stability of family life. To stray from these teachings is often seen not just as a personal failure, but as a betrayal of faith itself. Yet, within this devotion lies a challenge. The same expectations that give marriage a sacred aura can also trap couples in unions where love has faded. Religious leaders emphasize patience and endurance, reminding couples that suffering can be holy and that marriage is meant to last until death do us part. For some, this is a source of strength, a reason to work harder at their relationship. For others, it becomes a cage, forcing them to stay in silence rather than admit that their bond has crumbled. This strong presence of faith sets the stage for a deeper tension. On one hand, it promises stability, order, and moral clarity. On the other, it creates immense pressure to conform, even when the heart is no longer in it. And it is exactly in this gap between sacred promise and human reality that the struggles of Filipino marriages begin to emerge. In the Philippines, marriage is not only a sacred act of faith, but also a powerful social contract, one that extends far beyond the couple at the altar. To marry is to fulfill a duty to parents who expect grandchildren, to communities that prize stability, and to traditions that have stood for generations. From the earliest years, young Filipinos grow up surrounded by reminders that their worth is tied to family honor, and that honor is preserved most visibly through marriage. Parents often take an active role in guiding their children toward marriage, sometimes even arranging introductions or quietly pressuring them to commit early. A son or daughter who postpones marriage is seen with suspicion, whispered about in neighborhood gossip. Remaining single too long can spark speculation. What's wrong with him? Or why hasn't she settled down? In a culture where reputation travels fast and appearances carry heavy weight, marriage becomes less about love and more about social validation. This is not to say that romance plays no role. Courtship is still celebrated, often infused with old traditions such as serenades or formal visits to the parents' home. Yet, behind the gestures of affection lies a practical calculation. Families seek partners who match in religion, values, and often social standing. A young woman may be admired for her education, but if she marries outside her class or faith, the union can be met with disapproval. The underlying message is clear. Marriage is not just about personal happiness, it is a reflection of the family's image in the wider community. For many couples, these expectations create a heavy burden. Love may spark the relationship, but once vows are exchanged, the demands of conformity take center stage. Husbands are expected to provide financially, no matter how limited their opportunities. Wives are often judged by their ability to maintain harmony at home, raise children properly, and remain loyal regardless of difficulties. Struggles inside the marriage are rarely shared openly, since to admit to them risks tarnishing the family's reputation. Silence, once again, becomes the default response. And this silence can be costly. When two people enter a marriage under pressure rather than readiness, cracks are almost inevitable. Some realize only after the wedding that they are poorly matched, but by then, expectations have locked them in. Others discover that the romantic ideals they grew up with of lifelong love and unwavering support clash with the daily realities of financial hardship, personality conflicts, or unmet emotional needs. What might have been addressed with openness becomes buried under the weight of "what will people say?" As these pressures mount, the contradiction grows sharper. The very traditions meant to safeguard marriage can also undermine it, creating unions that are fragile beneath the surface. And as the numbers show, when appearances can no longer be maintained, more and more couples are choosing the difficult path of separation. This tension between public duty and private discontent leads us straight into the heart of the paradox: why a country so devoted to family and faith finds itself with one of the highest divorce and separation rates in the world. For a nation where faith and family are so deeply revered, the statistics are nothing short of startling. Surveys and studies over the past decades revealed that the Philippines consistently ranks among the countries with the highest rates of marital breakdown in Asia. Even though divorce itself remains heavily restricted, separations and annulments have risen dramatically. Courtrooms are full of cases where couples, once bound by solemn vows before God, now seek legal or unofficial ways to part. This reality stands in stark contrast to the country's image as the bastion of Catholic devotion. On paper, marriage is supposed to be indissoluble, a lifelong covenant. In practice, however, thousands of couples each year decide that continuing together is no longer possible. The contradiction is jarring. Sermons call for eternal commitment, while communities whisper about neighbors who have quietly separated. Behind the curtain of devotion, a different story unfolds, one of growing disillusionment with the very institution that is supposed to symbolize stability. The reasons for this rise in broken unions are complex. Some point to the growing influence of modern individualism, where people are less willing to stay in unhappy situations simply for the sake of appearances. Others emphasize the crushing weight of financial strain, with money disputes ranking among the top causes of separation. Still others highlight the rigid gender roles that leave both men and women dissatisfied. Men under pressure to be sole providers, women expected to endure without complaint. But perhaps the most telling factor is silence. In a society where admitting marital problems can bring shame, couples often keep their struggles hidden. Without open dialogue or access to counseling, frustrations pile up until they explode. When communication fails, when trust erodes, and when love no longer holds sway, separation becomes the only escape. This paradox has created a strange double reality. On Sundays, families still fill the pews, holding hands in prayer, singing hymns of devotion. But by Monday, lawyers draft petitions for annulments, and judges listen to stories of betrayal, neglect, or simple incompatibility. It is as if two Philippines exist side by side. One idealized in the church's teaching, the other lived in the private homes where vows quietly unravel. And the impact goes far beyond the couples themselves. Children caught in the middle of parental disputes struggle with confusion and instability. Extended families, once the proud guardians of honor, find themselves navigating shame and division. The very foundation of community life, the family unit, wobbles under the weight of these contradictions. The Philippines thus finds itself at a crossroads. It is still one of the most devout nations in the world, yet it also faces the undeniable reality of fractured families. To outsiders, this may seem like a contradiction without resolution. But for Filipinos, it is a daily reality, one that forces them to question not only the institution of marriage, but also the expectations of tradition and the demands of faith itself. If statistics reveal the scale of separation, it is in the quiet corners of daily life where the reasons truly emerge. Behind closed doors, far from the eyes of neighbors and the authority of the church, couples confront the struggles that slowly erode their marriages. These struggles are rarely dramatic at first. Instead, they creep in quietly through financial strain, unspoken resentment, or mismatched expectations, and grow until silence can no longer contain them. One of the most common sources of tension is money. For many Filipino families, income is unstable, with fathers working abroad as overseas laborers or mothers taking on small businesses to make ends meet. At first, these sacrifices are framed as noble acts, necessary to secure a better future. But over time, long absences, constant budgeting, and the stress of survival take a toll. Arguments over expenses become frequent, especially when one partner feels the burden is unfairly carried. What begins as small disagreements over bills or savings often grows into bitterness, with each side feeling unheard and unappreciated. Gender roles add another layer of conflict. Husbands are expected to embody strength and financial responsibility, while wives are judged on their ability to keep households harmonious. Yet in modern times, these roles are shifting. Women increasingly pursue education and careers, balancing professional ambitions with family duties. While this progress is empowering, it can also unsettle traditional dynamics, leaving couples unsure of how to adapt. A husband may feel threatened by his wife's independence, while a wife may feel frustrated by a partner unwilling to share responsibilities at home. And so, what looks like a stable home from the outside often hides a fragile reality. The expectations of faith and tradition urge couples to stay together, but the quiet unhappiness inside many marriages eventually overpowers the facade. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the hidden realities of societies around the world.